Good morning, everybody. Mr. Y here, obviously. Wanted to tell you just a little bit about NISMA. NISMA is going to be a little different this year, as you can imagine, as pretty much everything is a little different this year. NISMA, if you're not familiar with it, is an acronym. It stands for New York State School Music Association, basically an association of all the music teachers in New York State. And they sponsor things like All County, All State, Area All State, and what's called every year Solo Festival, Solo and Ensemble Festival, actually, technically. But that's where you can go and play a solo in front of a judge, and they give you a grade for it, and they tell you what you're doing right, and they tell you what you can work on to get better. They give you feedback, basically, which is a nice thing. You can also do ensembles, small ensembles, duos and trios and things like that, which is why they call it Solo and Ensemble Festival. And we've had a few people do that every year, but usually we have quite a few people do solos. This year it is going to be a little different. Normally what happens on a solo festival is you go in and you have three things you need to do. Number one is you play some scales, and usually you play three scales. Depending on your level, you have to learn either three scales or seven scales or all 15 scales, and then they choose three randomly for you to do. That's going to be a little different this year. You play your solo, obviously, also, of course, and solo is the most of the grade. Solo is 20 points. The scales are 4 points. And then the last thing you usually do is sight reading. Sight reading is something where you get a piece of music that you've never seen before. You get a couple of minutes to look through it, and then you play it for the first time, for the only time, really. And that one's also 4 points for a grand total of 28 points. If you get to level 5 and 6, of course, it's out of 100. They get pickier at level 5 and 6, as they should. But anyway, this year, things are going to be a little different. First thing is there is going to be no sight reading. You get sight reading for free this year. So you automatically start with 4 points right at the beginning, which is kind of cool. Sight reading is usually one of the more scary parts of the NISMA Solo Festival just because it's an unknown. You're not sure what you're going to get. You can't really prepare for it except by practicing sight reading, which of course you can't do. But you don't know the actual music that you're going to be playing at the time, which can be a little scary. Okay? So sight reading's off the table. You don't have to do that this year at all. The three scales that you'd normally do, normally at level 1 and 2, you have to pick three scales and practice them and get good at them, and then they have you play all three of those scales. That's a no-brainer. That's pretty easy. At level 3 and 4, you choose 7 scales, and then they choose 3 out of that 7 for you to play. So that's a little bit different, of course. You have to learn more scales and that kind of thing. This year, the difference is, in the pandemic world, you're not going to have to learn 7 scales. You're going to have to learn 3 scales. Now, the downside of that is they're going to tell you which 3 to learn, and they're not all going to be the easiest scales on your instrument. Okay, and there's different scales for different instruments. If you do end up wanting to do Solo Festival, I'll certainly let you know what scales you're going to play. Like I said, the sight reading's totally off the table. So the scales are a little easier this year. You're only going to use 3. You're only going to have to learn 3. The solo, of course, you're going to be able to practice and get good at, and I'll help you, or your private teacher, if you have one, will help you, of course. That's the way we usually do this. And then when the time comes to do this, you're going to upload a recording of you playing the scale in one long take. It has to be one long take. To a website, and then the judge can download it and look at it and give you feedback. That's how it's going to work this year. So if there is anybody interested in doing Solo Festival this year, and it's going to be totally feasible, we can still do it all the same way. I can help you guys after school, or during lunch or before school. We do lots of different things. This year, some of the help may be, of course, on video, which is the way life is right now. But that's okay. We can do that. And if anybody is interested in doing a solo festival this year, just let me know, and we'll be glad to hook you up with some stuff. If you were on track to do a solo last year when we were so rudely interrupted, some of you guys had already started practicing it in March, of course, before the world kind of shut down. If you want to, you could do the same solo you did last year. I would have absolutely no problem with that at all. Okay. If you don't want to, I can also give you some scales to look through, some solos to look through. I have a whole ton of solos here at school. I'll be glad to give you copies of a couple of them. You can play through them a little bit. You and I together can decide which one would be appropriate for you. Okay? Any questions, of course, you guys know my email. Just shoot me a message, and I'll be glad to get back to you. Thanks.